September 14th, 2021, is the 700th anniversary of the death of Dante Alighieri, the great poet known simply as Dante. Who was Dante, and why should he matter to us in 2021? All Italians know Dante as the greatest Italian poet. Modern Italian essentially came into existence thanks to Dante's decision to write his epic poem, La Divina Commedia, the Divine Comedy, in his mother tongue, the Tuscan vernacular. I say decision because Latin would have been the preferred language at that time in which to write. Latin was the language that all educated Europeans understood, and it was the language in which philosophy, theology, and poetry was written. Dante even wrote a treatise called The Eloquence of His Mother Tongue to justify his choice of Italian. As high school students, all Italians must learn by heart at least some of the more than 14,000 lines of the Divine Comedy. But this reverence for Dante is not a mere academic exercise. The spirit of Italian is inseparable from the poetry of Dante. Dante is to Italian as Shakespeare is to English. But Dante, like Shakespeare, belongs to the world. The message of his poem is universal, despite the many references throughout his poem to the deeds and misdeeds of men and women of Italy in the 13th century. It is the story of one man's journey, first down to hell, and then up the mountain of purgatory, where Christian souls are purged of their sins, and then finally, in the third part, to heaven or paradiso. Dante begins his journey by singing, and here we must remember that all epic poetry, at least figuratively speaking, is to be sung. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, mi ritrovai per una selva oscura, che la diritta via era smarrita. In the middle of the journey of our life, I found myself in a dark wood, for the straight way was lost. The poem is set in the year 1300, when Dante was 35, midway through his expected lifetime of 70 years. In fact, Dante died at the age of 56. Dante writes nostra vita, our life, to indicate that the journey he takes is one that we all take, each in our own way. If we read Dante's poem as he intended it to be read, we participate in that journey and we grow spiritually along the way. As readers, we cannot detach ourselves from the specifically Christian faith and doctrine upon which this grand edifice rests. If we approach the poem without any knowledge of the Bible or the Latin poets whom Dante revered, most notably Virgil and Ovid, then we cannot grasp its meaning. I am not saying that we must be Christian to appreciate this poem, but we must read it as if we were Christian. We must put ourselves in the position of the Christian believer who grapples with the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. We must ask ourselves, as all Christians do, what is the meaning and purpose of our life? To answer this question is not easy. To answer it fully, we must be willing to take the journey in our imagination, down to hell, and then up through purgatory, and finally to heaven. These are the terms on which we make our commitment to reading this long and difficult poem. Dante does not make the journey alone. In the opening canto of the Inferno, about 30 lines into the poem, Dante attempts to climb a hill, perhaps drawn by the beautiful light of the sun upon the shoulders of this hill. He is stopped by 3 beasts, first a leopard, then a lion, and lastly a she-wolf. The beasts thwart his attempt to climb the hill, and it is here that someone comes to his aid. This person is in fact a shade, or ombra in Italian. It is the shade of the poet Virgil, sent by Beatrice, who is in heaven. Beatrice was the great woman of Dante's life. He knew her since childhood, loved her, and wrote poems about her. Their love was platonic, since there was no physical relation between them. When Beatrice died, Dante lost his way. He turned his eyes in other directions, as if he'd forgotten the beauty and love that Beatrice embodied. And so Beatrice's pity for Dante and his waywardness spurs her to send Virgil to help him and to be his guide. Why Virgil? Because Virgil, for Dante, was the supreme poet, the author of the great epic poem, the Aeneid. In fact, Dante's Inferno was modeled heavily on Book 6 of the Aeneid. In Book 6, the hero Aeneas descends into Hades to meet his father Anchises. Dante probes the lowest depths and the highest heights that the human mind can ponder. He does this through constant allusion to his literary heritage. We cannot help but marvel at Dante's ability to bring together so many strands of thought and imagery into a single unified vision of the whole universe. If we feel intimidated by Dante's poem, we may take comfort in knowing that this poem is the product of humility, hard work, and reverence. Beatrice, it should be noted, is quite harsh to Dante when he finally meets her at the top of Mount Purgatory. He can scarcely look into her eyes because of his remorse for the wrongs he had committed. But Dante is not there to be coddled or soothed by her. He is there to repent and to be purged of his sins. It's not my purpose to summarize Dante's journey here. What I do urge you to do is to read the whole poem and to reflect on it for a long time as you go along. It is a great undertaking. One has to recall or go back to many passages from the Bible, and one has to read or reread the classic texts that Dante expected his readers to know, including Virgil's Aeneid and Ovid's Metamorphoses. But there is time. We have time to do many things: to eat, to sleep, to work, to play, and so on. But there's one thing above all that we all must do, and that is to understand or know ourselves. If we read a great work, such as the Divine Comedy, if we fully immerse ourselves in it, we will discover a truth about ourselves that we may never have imagined before. And that discovery might shake you to the core, as Dante was shaken when he looked into Beatrice's eyes. Dante's world seems very remote and different, even at odds with our world. So let us return then to the question I asked at the start of this clip. Why should Dante matter to us in 2021? He matters because he gives us a glimpse, as perhaps no other poet except Shakespeare has done, into the beauty of humanity and the universe as we might envision it. To celebrate Dante, then, is to celebrate our ability to love, to create, and to appreciate beauty. The life that Dante writes of, let us remember, is nostra vita, our life. Let us live, then, with the courage, perseverance, optimism, and love that Dante poured into his art. We should settle for nothing less.